Hello, everyone. My name is Peggy Ann Bloomer, and I teach graphic and information design at Central Connecticut State University. Today, I will be discussing my paper, From Automation to Augmentation, Teaching AI Literacy in Media and Design. This presentation examines how generative AI is reshaping creative education and argues that AI literacy should be taught not as a form of automation, but as a form of augmentation that supports human creativity, critical thinking, and ethical decision-making. Rather than asking whether AI belongs in the classroom, I am interested in how educators can create learning environments that help students engage AI thoughtfully, critically, and responsibly. Since 2023, generative AI has rapidly moved from experimental technology into everyday creative practice. Students now have access to image generators, large language models, and AI-assisted design software that can produce content in seconds. At the same time, employers increasingly expect graduates to understand how these tools function within professional workflows. This creates a challenge for educators. Should we embrace AI? Should we resist it? Should we regulate it? The real question is not whether AI should be used, but how we can teach students to engage these systems critically while maintaining human judgment and creativity. The central argument of this paper is the distinction between automation and augmentation. Automation emphasizes efficiency and replacement. Augmentation positions AI as a collaborative tool that expands creative possibilities while preserving human authorship, interpretation, and responsibility. Students still make decisions. Students still evaluate outcomes. Students still determine what is effective, ethical, and meaningful. Studio pedagogy has traditionally emphasized experimentation, critique, reflection, and iterative development. Students learn by engaging problems, evaluating outcomes, and refining their work over time. These practices become even more important when AI tools are introduced into creative workflows. The studio functions as what I describe as a system boundary between technological systems and human interpretation. By a system boundary, I do not mean a wall that separates people from technology. Instead, I mean a space where different forms of knowledge meet, interact, and are evaluated. On one side are AI systems that generate images, text, suggestions, and visual possibilities at remarkable speed. On the other side are human designers who bring experience, disciplinary knowledge, ethical judgment, and creative intention. The studio sits between these two worlds. Rather than accepting AI outputs as correct or authoritative, students are encouraged to slow down and examine them. They learn to question outputs, evaluate assumptions, identify strengths and weaknesses, and discuss ethical implications. Through critique, discussion, revision, and reflection, technological outputs become subjects of inquiry rather than final answers. In this sense, the studio acts as a mediating environment. It creates a pause between generation and acceptance. That pause is important because it allows students to ask not only whether something can be produced, but whether it should be used, how it communicates meaning, who it serves, and what assumptions may be embedded within it. The value of the studio, therefore, is not that it protects students from technology. The value is that it provides a structured environment where students can learn to engage technology critically, creatively, and responsibly. One of the key arguments in this paper is that teaching AI literacy requires three important pedagogical shifts. The first is what I call slow technological fluency. Students need to learn AI thoughtfully, not simply efficiently. Rather than moving quickly from prompt to output, they are encouraged to experiment, compare results, revise ideas, and reflect on how AI systems influence creative decisions. The goal is not speed, but critical engagement. The second shift is to reinsert disciplinary knowledge into AI-supported practice. While AI can generate ideas and visual variations, it cannot replace expertise in typography, hierarchy, accessibility, audience awareness, or visual rhetoric. Students must learn how to evaluate AI outputs using the principles and methods of their discipline, rather than accepting them uncritically. The third shift, and perhaps the most important in my own teaching, is to make process visible. Students document prompts, generated outputs, revisions, reflections, and design decisions throughout a project. Instead of focusing exclusively on the final product, we focus on how the work evolved. This documentation helps students recognize patterns in their thinking, reflect on their choices, and become more accountable for how they use AI within their creative process. Together, these three shifts move AI literacy beyond learning how to operate a tool and toward learning how to think critically, creatively, and ethically with AI. To explore how this framework operates in practice, I implemented it within an undergraduate Writing in the Disciplines, or WID course, in graphic and information design. The course is designed to help students move beyond creating visual artifacts and begin thinking like researchers, writers, and reflective practitioners. Throughout the semester, students investigate a topic related to design, communication, technology, or culture, and develop it into a substantial research project. The major assignment in the course is a 2,500 to 3,000 word research monograph, accompanied by a professionally designed publication. Students conduct research, evaluate sources, develop arguments, incorporate visual evidence, and ultimately design both print and digital versions of their work. The course is structured around multiple stages of development, including proposal writing, annotated bibliographies, literature reviews, peer critiques, visual integration exercises, drafting, and revision. In other words, students are not simply producing a final project. They are documenting and reflecting upon a sustained process of inquiry and design development. Within this environment, AI was integrated into research, ideation, visual development, and writing workflows. Students experimented with generative tools while continuing to participate in critique, revision, and reflective documentation. Importantly, the goal was not to teach software. The goal was to teach judgment. Students were encouraged to ask not only what AI could produce, but whether the results were accurate, effective, ethical, and appropriate for a particular audience and communication context. In this way, AI became one component within a larger process of research, reflection, and design decision-making. Students maintain process records similar to the sketchbooks and design journals traditionally used in studio education. These records made their interactions with AI visible and created opportunities for reflection and critique. By reviewing their documentation, students could see how ideas evolved over time and how different prompts, assumptions, and decisions influence the final outcome. What emerged was an important shift in how AI use was understood and assessed. The question was no longer, did you use AI? That question often leads to a simple yes or no conversation and positions AI primarily as an issue of compliance or academic integrity. Instead, the focus became, how did you use AI? This question opens a much richer discussion. Students are asked to explain how they developed prompts, how they evaluated generated outputs, how they revised or refined those outputs, and how they integrated them into broader research and design goals. For example, a student might generate multiple visual concepts using AI, reject several because they relied on stereotypes or visual cliches, revise the prompt, incorporate research findings, and then refine the final design through critique and iteration. In that case, the learning occurs not in the generation of the image itself, but in the evaluation, revision, and decision-making that follow. This approach shifts attention away from AI as a shortcut and toward AI as part of a documented creative process. It reinforces transparency, accountability, and critical thinking, while helping students understand that effective AI use requires judgment rather than simple automation. In many ways, the protocol mirrors the broader goals of studio education. The emphasis is not on the tool itself, but on making thinking visible. One of the most significant outcomes of the AI engagement protocol was that students developed skills that extended far beyond prompt writing or software proficiency. First, students developed critical evaluation skills. Rather than accepting AI-generated outputs as correct or authoritative, they learned to assess quality, relevance, accuracy, and effectiveness. Students compared multiple outputs, identified weaknesses, and evaluated whether results aligned with their communication goals and intended audiences. Second, students strengthened revision strategies. AI rarely produced a final solution. Instead, students learned to refine prompts, modify generated content, incorporate feedback, and iteratively improve their work. This reinforced the idea that design is an evolving process rather than a single act of production. Third, students developed greater awareness of bias and representation. Through critique and discussion, they observed how AI systems often reproduce stereotypes, visual cliches, dominant cultural assumptions, or limited perspectives. Recognizing these patterns encouraged students to question outputs rather than simply accept them. Fourth, students practiced research integration. AI-generated content was not treated as a substitute for research. Instead, students learned to compare generated information against scholarly sources, incorporate evidence into their projects, and use research to guide both prompt development and design decisions. Finally, students developed ethical reasoning skills. Discussions about authorship, transparency, intellectual property, accessibility, misinformation, and accountability became part of the design process. Students were encouraged to consider not only whether an AI-generated solution was effective, but whether it was responsible and appropriate. Taken together, these outcomes shifted AI from being a tool for rapid content generation to a catalyst for deeper inquiry and reflection. Students came to understand that AI could support exploration and idea generation, but that human judgment remained essential. In other words, AI became a starting point rather than a final answer. Although this project emerged within graphic and information design education, the framework is adaptable across a wide range of disciplines, currently navigating the rapid integration of generative AI into teaching, learning, and professional practice. The specific applications may differ, but the underlying educational challenges are remarkably similar. In design and architecture, students must evaluate AI-generated concepts, visualizations, and design alternatives while applying disciplinary knowledge and professional judgment. In engineering, students must critically assess AI-supported simulations, coding assistance, optimization systems, and technical recommendations, rather than accepting outputs at face value. In the humanities and communication disciplines, students increasingly encounter questions surrounding authorship, interpretation, voice, evidence, and the responsible use of AI-generated text and media. In health-related fields, students must consider issues of bias, transparency, accountability, and the ethical implications of AI-supported decision-making, where real-world consequences may be significant. Across all of these disciplines, AI literacy involves much more than learning how to operate a tool. Students must develop the ability to interpret outputs, critique assumptions, document processes, evaluate evidence, and reflect on the role technology plays in shaping decisions and outcomes. An equally important component is transparency. As AI becomes integrated into creative, scholarly, and professional workflows, students need to learn how to clearly acknowledge and document their use of these systems. This includes identifying what AI tools were used, how they were used, when they were used within the project workflow, and how generated content was revised, evaluated, or incorporated into the final work. Just as students are expected to cite sources, acknowledge collaborators, and document research methods, they should also be able to explain the role AI played within a project. This level of transparency helps maintain academic integrity, supports accountability, and provides valuable insight into the decision-making process behind the final product. In many ways, documenting AI use is not simply a compliance exercise. It is a reflective practice. By making AI interactions visible, students become more aware of their own choices, assumptions, revisions, and creative decisions. This transforms AI from an invisible tool into an object of critical inquiry. Whether in design, engineering, healthcare, communication, or the humanities, the core principle remains the same. AI literacy requires not only technical competence, but also interpretation, critique, documentation, transparency, and reflective judgment. The question is not whether AI will become part of educational environments. It already has. The more important question is how we design learning environments that support meaningful engagement with these technologies. As educators, we are preparing students to live and work in an increasingly complex world, shaped by artificial intelligence, automation, data systems, and rapidly evolving technologies. Students need opportunities to understand these tools, recognize their possibilities for creativity and innovation, and develop the skills necessary to adapt to ongoing change. At the same time, students must learn that technology should never be accepted uncritically. Throughout history, humans have relied on tools to extend their capabilities, but we have also been responsible for questioning their assumptions, limitations, biases, and consequences. AI systems are no different. Students must learn not only how to use these systems, but also how to evaluate them, challenge them, and understand how they shape knowledge, communication, and decision-making. AI literacy, therefore, becomes a form of ethical augmentation rather than automation. The goal is not to replace human judgment, creativity, or responsibility, but to strengthen them. Students learn not only how to use AI, but how to think with it, question it, critique it, and remain accountable for the decisions they make. Ultimately, the future of education is not about producing more efficient users of technology. It is about cultivating thoughtful, reflective, and ethically engaged citizens who can work alongside intelligent systems while remaining committed to human-centered values. If we teach AI literacy in this way, we can help ensure that technology serves human flourishing and contributes to the creation of more inclusive, accessible, and equitable solutions. The challenge before us is not simply to prepare students for an AI-enabled future, but to prepare them to shape that future responsibly. As AI becomes increasingly embedded in education, how do we preserve reflection, critique, and human judgment within increasingly automated learning environments? Thank you for listening.